Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I welcome everyone who is with us live here today. And a special shout out to those of you who will be watching the recording. We're glad that you're here as well. I am Colleen Sandquist. I am the Strategic Partner Manager for Reed Speaker and your hostess with the mostest for this amazing webinar. I echo Aaron in the subject matter experts we've brought before you today. So we're super excited to get started. On this next screen, you are going to see alternative ways for you to engage with the content that we have here today. You'll see a presentation QR code and the bit.ly link if you would like to pull those up and kind of interact with that on your own, get an up close and personal view there. And also on the right-hand side, we have created an excellent document of resources for you, again with a bit.ly link and a QR code. A PDF of the slide deck and the resources are also found in the handout section of the Livestorm platform. So we are going to just go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to take a moment and introduce our amazing panelists. And I'm going to start with Michelle Soriano from CAST, which is short for the Center for Applied Special Technology. Their slogan is "Until Learning Has No Limits," and I love that. I think it's wonderful. She is has a decorated past in education. She was at a region center in Texas. She's worked as a school administrator, a behavior specialist, PK to 12 instructional coach, gen ed teacher, special ed teacher. She comes with a vast history behind her. So she is available as a resource to you today for you to ask questions. And Michelle and I had the great pleasure of meeting in June at the UDL conference hosted by CAST, and we have just become fast friends, and she is amazing. She pumps out great content on social, so find her on social media. She has a partner in crime, a little sidekick, Kelly Suding, and they do some amazing things with some quick learns out there. So find them on LinkedIn. And our next panelist is a fan favorite of mine, Janae Minakuchi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not really sure. Excellent. Very good. Well, Janae and I have worked together for over 10 years. She is amazing, a passionate educator, as Michelle is as well. Janae is the coordinator for the UDL project across the state of New Mexico. Janae and her mighty team of specialists are literally changing the face of education throughout the entire state, being more UDL focused. She also comes with a very decorated educational past, assessment, secondary education, early childhood education, consulting, teaching and reading, and she is a board certified teacher and an Apple Distinguished Educator. So a couple of fantastic guests with us. And Ginger Dewey, my colleague, my knower of all things Reed Speaker. She is an amazing resource for our clients and for us as well. She has over 38 years of teaching experience, higher ed, and also in the K-12, but more focusing on higher ed. And she handles all of our onboarding and our customer implementation focuses here. She is the Educational Development Manager. So we're going to jump right into it here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, we're just going to start with a quick 10,000-foot view. As we look at the screen here, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, we have a cute little penguin with some binoculars looking around, trying to understand what's going on. I'm going to kick it over to Janae for just a 10,000-foot view of UDL.
Thanks, Colleen. I'm excited to be here with everybody today. So our focus when we talk about Universal Design for Learning is that this is not a canned curriculum, but Universal Design for Learning is rather a framework that we look at the what, the why, and the how of learning. And so the CAST, which is amazing, has set up these guidelines, and they actually just released the new guidelines, the 3.0, which is exciting that we have a new release for them. And I highly encourage everybody to head over to cast.org if you are not familiar with these guidelines. And so Universal Design for Learning works and focuses in on this framework for all students. So it is not a focus just for special ed students, a focus just for regular ed students, but rather the what, the why, and the how of learning for our students. And so we use this framework as a lens. We like to refer to it as a lens to help us guide and break down the barriers that students may encounter or educators might encounter when planning lessons and when working with our students. The amazing thing about the guidelines is they work well with everything that you're actually doing already in your classroom. And so when you look through the lens of UDL, you're breaking down that barrier and giving access for all students and making sure that everybody has a chance to be a part of that classroom and have a say in what they're doing. My favorite thing with Universal Design for Learning is that we say what's necessary for some is good for all. And then it also allows for voice and choice. And so those are two big, powerful things and right at the core of who I am. Colleen knows that very well. So.
I could not agree more. Outstanding. Excellent. Okay, kicking it over to you, Michelle. Talk to us just a tiny bit about accessible material, 10,000 foot view. What do we need to know?
Hey, y'all. Hey, really excited to be here. So accessible educational materials, and you will hear us throughout the discussion today call it AEM. And what this is that they are print and technology-based educational materials, including printed and electronic textbooks and any related core materials that are designed or enhanced in a way that can be used across all variability. So anybody and everybody can leverage that information. And the way I really love to make sense of this is think about the content that our learners are taking in. Right there, taking it into their brain, they're sucking it up, whether it's a book, that information in that book, whether it's a video, it's the information they're learning from the video, whether it's a document, it's the information that they're taking in from that document. The materials are made accessible when that information is designed from the beginning in a way that if I needed to access it in a different format, if I needed it in Braille, if I needed it in large print, if I needed it in tactile graphics, it's designed in a way that I could request it and get that in that format. And so when we think about accessible materials, we're thinking about the content that we're engaging with. We always want to think about accessibility from the forefront. How can I make sure that I'm following these accessibility best practices in designing, in procuring the content that we're going to be leveraging so that any learner can take it in and engage with it? And I just want to make note that on this screen that we're demonstrating right now, there is a GIF in the upper right corner of a penguin. And the penguin has binoculars and is looking from one side to the other, just looking at these big topics from afar. Passing it back to you, Colleen.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate that. And now we are going to hear from our resident expert, Ginger Dewey, on assistive technology and UDL tools. And get ready for the acronyms because they're going to be coming at you here today. So thanks, Ginger.
Thank you, Colleen. First off, assistive technology is a very broad term, and I'm going to pull it down to accessible technology. And with accessible technology, you're talking about tools that remove barriers for students or other individuals so they can access the materials. And as you've already heard, UDL tools, UDL, Universal Design for Learning, what's good for one is good for all. So you've got to remember many times you may have hidden disabilities that are not revealed. These tools being available to all students then help those that don't have the IEP or the disability services requirements to receive special assistive technology? Colleen, back to you.
Excellent. So I'm going to give you a 10,000-foot view of the National Education Technology Plan. Now, this is something that was released from the Office of Education, and originally it was part of the Educate America Act in 2000. The plan has been updated several times over the course of these years, most recently updated in 2016. So the new release, though, focuses more on prescriptive strategies to address developments when it comes to digital education technology. It's a great resource for you just to start looking at learner profiles, educator profiles, systems, plans, rubrics, feedback mechanisms. All of this is laid out for you, and you will find that in the resource document where you can learn just a little bit more. So it outlines how students and educators and state leaders can design, access, and use technology and these resources to advance learning. So we're going to dive into each one of these digital divides as they have been called by the Board of Ed. The first one is the digital use divide. When we think of a divide, we have people or something on one side and something on the other with a deep chasm in the middle. So on one side of the divide, we have students that have access to technology, which encourages them and allows them to analyze, build, produce, and create. So we have these students that have access to technology for creation and exploration and analysis. On the other side of the divide, there aren't those things. There's passive assignment completion, but you can see from one side to the other the difference in how the use of technology is implemented. The second divide we're going to take a quick look at is digging into the design divide. So this is systems or institutions or organizations on one side of the divide that provide time and support to educators and learning experience to help them increase their use and expand their breadth of the use of technology. Conversely, on the other side, systems do not, leaving educators without the capacity to design or incorporate technology into their classroom. And this can vary from classroom to classroom, building to building within a district, department to department if we're looking at a higher ed institution. So it is not across the campus. It can be as minute as from classroom to classroom. Okay, and finally, our access divide. So we have students on one side of the divide. They have equitable, sustainable access to connectivity, devices, and digital content. Those on the other side, if we think about some rural communities, that divide is huge. And when we think about the access divide, we're also talking about digital health and safety and citizenship as well. So not only connecting in, but how do we respect the technology that we have? Okay, I think it is now time for our first drawing. Erin?
Yes, so I have used a random, I guess a random name picker that I found on the internet, and our first winner is Barbara Mazza. So I will be sending you a link to the form for you to give us all your information so we can get your t-shirt to you, and we have 2 more winners, so hang in there, guys.
Great. And if you wouldn't mind filling that out and getting it right back to us, that would be fantastic. We'll get those ordered for you today. Okay, we're moving on to our panel questions. Question number 1, common barriers that we're faced with today. What are learners challenged with today? Janae, we're going to start with you.
Thanks. So a lot of the common barriers that we're seeing, probably in New Mexico, but also I'm sure several are seeing this around the state, is one of the big barriers we're seeing is engagement with students. We're seeing that there's a struggle we're competing between TikTok and everything else going on in the social media world, that everybody wants this fast. But we're also competing. One of the barriers is equal access. Many of our students, especially in New Mexico, we have a lot of rural communities. And so when we talk about technology, they don't necessarily still have the infrastructure to access that technology, which then would allow for access for a lot of the other students. We're also seeing some barriers of designing lessons for all students. So many times we're still in this teacher standing at the front and this direct instruction, rather than this teachers moving into a facilitation role and including all students and giving every student a voice. And so many times when we look at lesson design and when we go back to the UDL guidelines, we want to look at the engagement piece and the action and expression, and then the representation as well. So how are students representing their learning? Is it always paper pencil, or is there a barrier because some of the students are struggling with paper pencil? Are they able to show us what they know and their knowledge in a different light? So could they make a movie? Could they develop a song to show that they've mastered this concept? What strength does that student have that they're able to share their learning with us? And so UDL has been around for a long time, Universal Design for Learning. This is not something brand new, but teachers, we're faced with barriers too from states. In the state of New Mexico, I think we had over 15 initiatives that came from our public ed department. And so we have a lot of things coming down from the public ed department. And then we have students who are trying to help them accomplish and master these initiatives. One of them, I know across the nation, we're looking at multi-tiers, the MTSS, so the multi-tier system of support. In New Mexico, we call it the MLSS, so the multi-layers system of support. We're also trying to braid in SEL, braid in structured literacy, bring in those math skills. So those are some of the big barriers kind of facing right now. And so the work I do, we try to help our educators through the lens of UDL. We can braid all of these pieces together and help our educators take some stuff off their plates while meeting the needs of all of our students in our classrooms. So I hope that gives you kind of an idea of some of the stuff going on out there.
There you go. There you go. Michelle, from a materials perspective, what are you seeing out there in the classrooms today that might be barriers for learners?
Yeah, great question. And Janae, I just want to say that I completely agree. I want to and that design piece is so important, not only for the environment, but also from the content side, right? So I think some common barriers that we're seeing with content, materials, is just the one, understanding of accessibility and what accessibility is, what it truly means. What does it mean for me in my role, whether I am an educator, whether I am an IT director, an administrator, just that common understanding of what it is and how do we take that into practice. Another thing is really knowing what the local protocols are for requesting materials that are in different formats. So if I have students in my classroom who might need to access the content in different ways, how do I request that? Because we also know that all students deserve to have the materials in a timely manner. And when we say timely manner at CAST, we mean at the same time as their peers who are using other materials. And so we want to make sure that we understand, how do we ask for those materials? How do we order them? How do we make sure we're designing them? You know, as an educator, as a teacher, y'all, I used to design all kinds of documents and I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I didn't think about accessibility in the forefront when I first started. But how can I make sure that I am designing the documents that I'm going to be posting or using or leveraging in a way that anybody can access them? And at CAST, our accessibility solutions, we do have some guidelines on how to, right? How do you create accessible documents? How do you create accessible videos? How do you create accessible websites and just different things so that we can walk step by step to make sure that whether it is a requirement for the students based on their IEP or their 504 plans, or it's a preference because what's required for some could be beneficial for all, we're making sure that we're making sure that we are knowledgeable when we are sitting on curriculum committees and we're deciding which curriculum to purchase. We understand that accessibility piece and we know exactly what components are going to be coming together so that all of our students, and when we say all, we really mean all, can access it and can engage with it. And so I really do feel that common barrier is all centralized around accessibility, the understanding of it, and how do I take it, use it, and be proactive in that design.
Yeah, I love that. Proactive piece is so important. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, my friend Ginger, share with us about AT.
All right. With accessible tools, there are many, many free tools out there. And let me say, first off, a lot of the free tools are good, but you have no guides. You have no VPAT, which is voluntary product accessibility template, to know what is going to work and what is not going to work within them. And you may be going to many different places to access them. With paid products, you do get VPATs, and all the tools are located in one place. And that's important because if a student says, okay, I've got to go up and use a Chrome extension here to do this. Now I'm in Word, so I've got to use this on this particular ribbon to do that. And then I'm out on a website and I'm in Firefox, so I've got to use something else. So having it all consolidated into one place is very beneficial. And a lot of the paid tools are not pricey. You can get very realistic prices for them. Colleen?
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your input here. On to question 2. So what are some ways educators can provide accessible material, and how will this benefit learners? And Michelle, we're off to you first, friend.
Oh, yeah. So the great thing is, even if you don't know about how to create accessible documents or how to engage or purchase accessible documents, y'all, we've got your back, right? We are here to support you. And so there are step-by-step protocols. One, we like to use the acronym POUR, P-O-U-R. We want to pour accessibility on everything that we do. So we want to go through and really ask ourselves, you know, is this content, is this material that I'm going to be using, is it perceivable? Can everybody perceive it and take it in a way that's relevant to them? Do I have options for making the font larger? Can I make sure that there's options within the accessibility for individuals to change the contrast if need be? We want to make sure that it's operable. Y'all, not everybody uses this good old thing called a mouse, right? Sometimes we're just navigating through our assistive technology or we're using our keyboards. We want to make sure that our content, our materials are designed in a way where we don't have to have a mouse to use it. It's operable. I can navigate in the way that the individual who created it intended it to be navigated through. I can click through and get to my links. Is it understandable? If you are reading something and you're like, say, what? I have no clue what they are talking about. This is way up here and I need it to come right down here to be relevant. That means it's not accessible because people can't engage with it and they can't understand it. So when you're looking at materials, when you're looking at your content, when you're looking at how you're presenting information, making sure it's understandable. And then lastly, we try to make sure that it's robust. And robust has lots of dimensions to it. But one way, some of us use our phones to engage with content. Some of us use laptops. Some of us use iPads. We want to make sure that whatever content we're engaging with It doesn't matter which technology device we're leveraging. They are going to get that same experience. They're not going to lose out on the flow, on the purpose, on the structure of it, because they're choosing to engage with it from a different device. So we like to use the pour to help us vet. But y'all, we know that we're going to be creating some of our own things. So of course, in the good sense of education, we have an acronym for that too. And we like to slide into accessibility. And so we look at our styles, looking at the heading structure. When we create documents, making sure that we're leveraging those headings, making sure that we're looking at links, and we don't have links that are just really, really long ABC 1, 2, 3s. We want to define those links, making sure that if I am reading using my ears and I'm hearing what the link is being read, it is very descriptive so that I know where that link is going to take me. Making sure that my images have alt text. I just want to make sure that I'm describing what is important in that image so that if learners who are reading with their ears can also have benefits from those images. And then we want to look at the descriptions, and we want the design. How are we making sure that our design is meeting those accessibility guidelines? And then y'all, the evaluation. We have a lot of really great tools, such as the accessibility checkers, that will help you kind of walk through to make sure that your materials are as accessible as possible. But those accessibility checkers only capture 30% of mistakes. So while they are a great start, we also want to make sure that we're using the accessibility guidelines. We're embedding ourselves into it so that we're learning it more, so that we can identify with the accessibility concerns there might be within the documents that we're producing. So all that to say, we got your back. We will help you through it. But if you will go on to the AIM Center website, that is, and I'll drop it in the chat here in just a bit. There are some step-by-step how-tos on how do I make sure that I'm vetting for accessible materials, and how do I make sure I'm creating accessible materials.
Yeah, outstanding. Outstanding. You bring up such good points. And that's going to lead us to question 3. And this is for Ginger. And what are some ways that educators can ensure that their materials are accessible? Michelle tiptoed on this, but can you dive a little bit deeper in here for us?
One of the ways I like to check my material is to listen to it. I'm going to catch a lot of things that I don't realize that I have done when I listen to it. I use one of our products here at Read Speaker, and I will find out, wait a minute, that jumped from one place to another place. It didn't flow right. So my reading order is not correct. Or I left out some very important words in this sentence. Or I have the word form instead of the word from. And your checkers aren't going to catch those things, but your ears will. Another way that I check them is to actually tab through the documents. And when I tab through it, that's helping to ensure that order is correct. And then I can apply my accessible tools, such as a page mask or a reading ruler. And a page mask is the electronic equivalent of cut a hole in a sheet of paper and move it up and down. And then you have the reading ruler, which is a note card. Now, the accessibility checkers, a lot of those are for faculty. They are getting the documents accessible. Then its complement is those accessibility tools that I was mentioning, because those are the ones that the students are going to use. They're going to change their color combinations. They're going to change their font size, their reading speed. Some people listen faster than others. Some people need bigger text. Some people need a dark background. Those are accessibility tools that students can then use. So think of checkers and going through that manual process that I was talking about, which is a check, as the complement to what the students use. They go together. They're not one or the other. You need both parts. Colleen?
Excellent. Thank you so much. So question number 4, we're looking at our classroom setups today. Diversity is very present in our schools. We embrace this diversity. So how can educators embrace the new UDL guidelines to offer voice and choice to learners? And I'm going to start with you, Janae.
Thanks, Colleen. Educators can jump on this by really, I think one key thing that we're missing in today's classrooms is that relationship piece. And even though we're talking about UDL and we're talking about AIM and we're talking about accessibility, I think a lot of this starts with that relationship, because if we build that relationship and that trust with those learners in our classroom, then we're able to see where maybe there's a barrier, and the barrier is not the student, but rather where is a way that I can design my lesson to embrace their voice? How can I give them a voice? Is there something in their background? Is there something in their knowledge base? Are they an incredible artist? Are they, so it goes back into this student agency, and also it goes into their strengths. So what are the strengths of my students? And then when we figure out what those strengths are and how they learn best, do they learn best through auditory, giving everything auditorily? Do they learn best with the assistance of text to speech? Do they learn best with speech to text? Do they learn best by having maybe an iPad or maybe read speaker available to them? How that breaks down some of those barriers, and then it dives us right into that engagement piece, and then their ability to be able to respond and show how they learned this content the best and how to really display their knowledge. I can see with the power of AI right now coming out that students are having new ways of showing their learning through AI, but not in a sense of cheating, but more in a sense of project-based learning. They're taking real life examples and activities and bringing that into their learning, and actually being able to choose how they want to show you they've mastered this concept. And I love the fact that so many of our students now have the opportunities. I feel old now. They have these opportunities that we didn't have. And there's jobs out there that we have no idea still yet to come. And so I feel when we look into the world and through the lens of accessibility and access, there is so much more and so many more opportunities for so many learners now. So I think that's a big piece that educators need to embrace. What we did day in and day out, we need to start looking at our lessons and looking at designing for the students in our actual classrooms, and not what always worked. And so did it always work last year? Did it work prior to COVID? How can we meet the needs of our students and the ever-changing world and the environment we're in? And also value that relationship and what they bring to the classroom by giving them more of a say in their learning. Because I feel when students feel that ownership, their learning is going to stick, and they're going to be excited about it, and they're going to continue to grow and want to move forward in that aspect. And I see that in the work we're doing here in New Mexico. By adding voice and choice in so many of our classrooms, we are seeing growth. We are seeing the pendulum kind of moving in our test scores. I just see some amazing things, and some incredible educators who have been reignited and re-sparked for their desire to work with students and to make them very successful in the work they're doing.
I love that. I love that. I think, the days of stand and deliver are going to start to fade, and using and embracing these UDL guidelines, we're really shifting the educator into the facilitator role. Fantastic for everyone. So Michelle, do you have a yes and here for us?
Yes. And I just wanted to reiterate exactly what Janae just said, is that, especially thinking about the new guidelines 3.0, it is really focused on learner agency, right? How can we support learner agency? How can we make sure that we're building that capacity for all learners to be able to actively participate in making choices that are relevant, that are needed to their own learning pathway. And I love to think about this from just my own experience as a mom, even, when you have learners, and I have 4 kids, all of different, desires and passions and strengths, but you get to a point where you're like, man, what's going to happen when they graduate? They're not going to have these amazing educators to tell them exactly what it is that they need in order to be successful, or what they need to do in order to, pass or move forward. And so we have to start thinking that big picture. How can I help them build capacity? How can I make sure that they understand what it is that they need in order to really get into the learning, really be successful in whatever terms their success is? And then also just thinking about, as an educator, I will walk into classrooms and I love it. And a lot of classrooms will look really pretty, right? And look really cool. But then when you get into the questions and you're like, so tell me why? Why did you choose to do this? And there's no intentionality behind it, right? There's no purpose behind the choices that we're using or the options that are being provided. That is a gap there, right? So making sure that we're always thinking about that variability and the need and the proactive in identifying barriers that we could remove if we provided certain choice and options. And so I yes and everything, and just want to reiterate that.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, end of question 4. Before we move on to question 5, Erin, do we have another winner?
We do have another winner. Our next winner is Claire O'Sullivan. And evidently we're having some trouble with the Google form. Yes, Claire is a friend of Reed Speaker, so excited for her. I will be sending you a DM and just asking your preference for how you want to send your information to us. So thanks.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. On to question number 5. How do you apply the UDL guidelines when designing a lesson or some instructional material here? And let's see, Michelle, lead the way on this one for us.
Oh yeah. Okay, y'all. The number one thing, the UDL guideline, it's all about a mindset, right? It's all about how we're thinking about planning, how we're thinking about designing. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is that we know that the barrier is in the environment and the curriculum. It's not in the student. And so when we updated the guidelines 3.0, the team did a really great job of making sure that accessibility was really embedded throughout, that there were great considerations as you're thinking through what might be these potential barriers. There are considerations with that accessibility piece built into those as well. And so one of the things I always love to do, and I'm sure everybody has their own ways on how they're going to leverage the guidelines, but I would also sit down and look at all of my favorite things that I've used in the classroom, because we do a lot of really great things, but we just don't know the intent behind it. What is it helping to address? So you could sit down and really look at those guidelines and say, hey, I've got all these strategies. What barriers do those strategies really help address? And then you have those identified so that when you do predict some barriers that might be present in your learning environment or in the curriculum, you can go and say, oh, hey, this strategy aligns to helping remove that barrier. Another thing is just thinking about the needs of all of your students and the potential students that you might have. We don't know who's going to be in our classroom tomorrow because the mobility is high. So we want to make sure that we're following those accessibility guidelines from the beginning, and anything that we're doing as we're considering and leveraging the UDL framework, so that we know, no matter what, we did the best we could to make sure that our environment is as accessible as possible. And of course, we will constantly be improving that as we go through.
Excellent. Very good. Janae, over to you for a yes and.
Yes, and to everything she said. The other thing that we are finding is that we're now bringing in parents as well. So they have an understanding of what's going on and that this is correct. If I ask my, because many of our parents are from traditional classrooms. And so if the student was asked to make a video, they're like, I don't think that was what was supposed to happen. And so by making parents feel comfortable that yes, in our instructional design and with our educators, that they're on board with it as well. And this is how we're having our students have their voices. So I think that's a good key component to bring in our families to also strengthen that team, that we're working together to make our students be successful. And so even though our teachers are working hard to design and work on the designing of the lesson and everything that Michelle said, it's been super important for us to educate our parents in on that journey as well, so that we don't get as much pushback. Sometimes they're like, where's that math facts? Why aren't we doing them this way? Or how come we're no longer doing the traditional spelling test? And so just having that partnership brought in, I think, is an important thing to remember in that aspect as well. So back to you, Colleen.
Excellent. Great addition there. I'm working over here on the side with Erin trying to get this Google link working for our people. So, all right, outstanding. We're moving on to question 6. So now we're going to try and shift our focus just a bit on the role of technology in the classroom when it comes to providing access. And Ginger, we're going to start with you on this.
Okay, first off, we've talked a lot about K-12, but everything that's been talked about also applies to higher ed. We have disability services instead of 504s. And another thing to look at is when a student moves from K-12 into higher ed, they do not necessarily get the accommodations that they had in K-12. So you've got to keep that in mind. A lot do not declare for one reason or another. So you have all these students that maybe need something, but aren't saying they need something. Technology helps with that. We mentioned earlier a page mask and a reading ruler. There are other things such as text mode where they can change the font up. They can narrow the screen to where it's the width of their eyes. They can put space between letters. They can change the voices. They can change the whole look and feel of the document by working with it with technology. Technology should complement the content. It should not be a new barrier. It should be part of how they're accessing it. The consistency of the same tools throughout is important because once students learn how to use the tools, they're going to keep using the tools. And that's an important aspect. Janae, do you have
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, and do you have an and yes?
Yes, and I do. I'd like to yes, and with the higher ed. So it's really important in the K-12 that so many, and I can speak from experience because I've had to advocate for several students transitioning from high school into higher ed. In the higher ed setting, the students have to be the advocate because of the different rules that are in place, especially for, I think it's HIPAA because they're 18 now. So many times when a student transitions from being a senior in high school into a higher ed, FERPA, thank you. I knew it was one of them. It's hard for them. They have to go and advocate. So that has been one of the roles, even though technology plays an incredible role in the classroom now. And some of our students start with technology in kindergarten and they have had it and access to it all the way through high school. When they reach higher ed, they have to go in and be the one to advocate for those tools for themselves. And so I think as educators, we need to help those students develop that advocacy role so that they are prepared to go and advocate and be able to say, this is how I learn best. And this is what I need to support me to be successful when I am in higher ed. And many times that's been one of my goals as a lifelong person and advocate for students is to get with as many universities as possible because we give so many supports and help our students in K through 12. And then many times when they move to the higher ed piece, they have to then start advocating for themselves, and they need to be able to understand how to do that. I also feel not only in higher ed, I feel when we get into the workplace as well, that we need to help that transition in that aspect as well. And I feel so many companies now are starting to open up and understand what accessible materials are, what accessible presentations are, what it looks like for somebody to no longer take notes on a paper pencil, but yet they are fully engaged in your meeting. They're taking notes on their phone because they have that access, or they're using an AI tool to take notes for them now. So the role technology plays in our classrooms is huge, and it's forever changing, and it looks different for each student and each individual. And so I think the more that we come together in webinars like this, the more that we share this knowledge, we're able to help bring that advocacy role and also that awareness and knowledge that everybody learns differently. And we should be able to help them have access in any environment that we're in. And it goes back to our planning for the barriers. So like it all kind of goes full circle back together to this. So Michelle, I didn't know if you had another yes and?
Yes. And I will just say, and I don't know who quoted, I'm quoting somebody and I don't know who, so it's not my words, but for individuals without disabilities, technology makes things easier. For individuals with disabilities, technology makes things possible. And so just always advocating for the diverse learners, just thinking about technology is a needed, essential part of providing access when we're thinking about more than availability, right? We're thinking access beyond just being available.
Yeah, just fantastic conversations, just so wonderful. So we've heard from our panels. Before we get into these Give It a Go activities, I'm going to toss to Erin. First of all, we have our final t-shirt winner. And are there any questions coming through in the chat or points that maybe we want to bring out and discuss? So I'm going to kick it over to you.
Okay, so I will take it. Our third t-shirt winner is Beth Minio. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. So I will be reaching out to you to get your information. Thanks.
Okay, very good. So we've pulled together some resources. We've had a great conversation here today. We have heard so much. Like for me, it just gets my juices flowing. It really helps me want to start making some changes, even internally here, at ReadSpeaker. How can I make this presentation more accessible? How can I create documents in a more accessible manner? The resources that have been pulled together are going to help you either step up your accessibility game or step off on your accessibility and UDL journey. So please be sure that you grab those. So let's talk about some Give It a Go activities, tips and tricks that we can send our attendees off with some real concrete next steps. What can I do tomorrow? How can I be 1% better tomorrow than I am today? It's a lot, and it is a lifelong journey we are all on, but what can we give them to be 1% better? And let's just start with identifying the learner needs. And since we're talking about the guidelines, Michelle, Janae, do either one of you want to step off there?
I'm happy to start it, and then Janae, I know you'll yes and. One good thing that I would suggest, because we all know we've been there as we started our journey, things can be overwhelming. I suggest picking one area and just zoning in on it, one area of the guidelines, and saying, okay, how am I going to make sure that the comprehension is perceivable? Just zone in on that area and just start exploring ways, things that you're already doing, things that will align to that to help support options that will support it one at a time, one square at a time. And you might consider just, okay, I know that I have this lesson coming up and I know there's some predictable barriers. What can I do? How can I zone in on that? Janae, right over to you, friend.
No, you're good. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think also one thing to look at right away in the lessons we're doing is how much has an educator reflect? I think reflective practice is huge in looking at those guidelines, but how much am I standing in front of the classroom talking versus how much are my students actually engaging with each other? I know depending on the different, in a technology piece, depending on the different platforms you're in, Apple, Google, and Microsoft all have the little microphone built into their system somewhere. And so going back in there, could you give each one of your students an opportunity? Could you show them where the embedded microphone is built in Microsoft Word, in a Google Doc, in a Pages document, and give them the opportunity maybe to dictate their writing versus having to be able to do paper pencil. And so dictation is a skill that has to be taught for sure, but many of these students are very aware of dictating into their cell phones. So could you open up a new world for them that in their paper writing, they actually have that opportunity on all three of those platforms to be able to do that. The other thing that we have done quickly with a lot of our teachers that we're working with, so many of our classes give rubrics. And so instead of using the rubric, actually taking that rubric and maybe have the student, instead of them actually maybe creating a project or doing a paper pencil piece, use that rubric and have the student auditorially tell it to you. Maybe have them create, I've talked about creating a movie. I'm very artistic. And so create a movie, create a podcast, draw. Could they draw their knowledge? So what is the strength of that student? So it could be just one thing. It doesn't have to be a huge lesson overhaul. Do you have Legos in your classroom? Could they build what they have learned? So maybe you're talking about historical fiction characters. Could they build something from the plot of that story to show you that they've mastered that concept? I will tell you, high schoolers love to build with Legos, so it's not a thing that cannot be done in high school. Having some Play-Doh, could they use the Play-Doh to represent their learning? There are just sand, going outside. There's multiple ways to grab something within your classroom that does not always necessarily have to be paper pencil, but there's another way for our students to show their learning. So I hope that gives some ideas out there.
Excellent. Great. So we are running short on time. So I am going to ask Janae, Michelle, and Ginger, teacher tip or trick. One trick. What's your favorite ingredient when you're looking at creating inclusivity in your classroom? What's your favorite thing to do?
All right, I'll kick off. My favorite thing for creating inclusivity is to ask my students how they want to demonstrate their knowledge. I had a lesson about converting between decimal and percentage. I told them they had to come up with a way to present to the class how they could remember it. I had everything from posters to songs to a video to just showing it on paper pencil, but I let them choose how to do it. And that gave them the idea of they were part of it.
Excellent. So consulting your learners, that's a great, great tip. Okay, Michelle, you're next up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am going to stay true to the accessibility piece. And I would say that the best thing that I would do tomorrow is if you are presenting leveraging PowerPoints, if you're using documents, use that accessibility checker. It will walk you through. So if you go right at the top bar, it will be check either review accessibility or check the accessibility checker. And it will walk you step by step on any of the accessibility issues that are the big ones that it's capturing. And it teaches you along the way how to change it. So trick one, go ahead and use that accessibility checker. And the second thing I would start with is just exploring the slide document and practice. Go and create a document and go take something that you're using tomorrow and turn your subheadings into actual headings in the styles. And that makes a world of difference for individuals who are navigating through the document using different formats.
Excellent. Great tips. Okay, Janae.
Yes, and my tip would also kind of piggybacks off of Ginger's, is I would ask my students, how do they like to learn best? What is your favorite way of showing me your learning? And then from that, we can collaboratively create a choice board so that in every activity that we're doing, we have the opportunity to have choice within our classroom. And so this is an ongoing, growing choice board in our classroom. And so also with Michelle, I think for teachers, I love both of those. I would use them hand in hand, but to get at the heart of my kiddos in my classroom, I want to know their strength and how they learn best and what they feel is their superpower. And then from there, we can build and design our lessons based off of that.
I love that so much great stuff. And together we can close these divides. We're going to take it all right back to that EdTech plan and close up those divides. So special thanks and shout out to Janae and Michelle. Here is their email information. Please reach out to them. They are available to you. If you are looking to explore or you need some resources, they have made themselves available to you. So thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your expertise. Shout out to my friend Ginger. My contact information is here as well. We are just so excited to have you all with us here today. And let's just keep continuing on, doing the good thing. We appreciate all that you're doing in your classrooms across the country. Higher Ed, K-12, we respect you, we honor you, we see you. Thank you so much, and have yourself a great rest of the day.